stuff like this should not happen because they give you the booklet that said, don't take this, 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 and this, the letter of the law. Do not take any of these things. And when you've been in the league this long, you know what it is.
He is 35 years old. His stats are crashing. His body is breaking down. Ladies and gentlemen, this might be the final curtain call for his entire career. But is there any road to redemption for Podcast P, or is this the end? We are diving deep into the wreckage right now. On January 31st, 2026, the NBA silenced the star, suspending Paul George without pay for 25 games for breaching the NBA NBPA anti-drug program. This is his first strike under the collective bargaining agreement, but make no mistake, it is a catastrophic one. The ban was immediate. While the Sixers were gearing up to battle the New Orleans Pelicans that night, George was already locked out of the arena. He is in exile until March 25th, 2026, when he is finally eligible to return against the Chicago Bulls. By the time he steps back on the court, there will be roughly 10 games left in the season. The league kept the files sealed, refusing to name the substance, but George, he refused to stay silent. He issued a statement trying to control the narrative before it spiraled out of control. He claims this nightmare stems from an improper medication he took while desperately seeking treatment for his mental health. His statement was raw. Over the past few years, I have preached the importance of mental health to anyone who would listen. But while treating an issue of my own recently, I slipped up. I made the mistake of taking a medication that was not on the approved list. I own this. I take full responsibility, and I apologize to the Sixers front office, my brothers in the locker room, and the Philly faithful for this lapse in judgment. I am laser focused on using this time away to get my mind right and my body primed so I can salvage this season when I return. That statement exploded across social media, amplified by ESPN's Shams Charania, but the damage was already done. Let's talk about the money, because the financial hit is absolutely staggering. George is torching approximately $11.7 to $4 million in cold hard cash. He is sitting on a $51.7 million contract for the 2025-26 season. That breaks down to nearly $470,000 evaporating every single game he misses. Let me put that in perspective for you. George is losing nearly $12 million because he took a pill he wasn't supposed to take. That is more money than most NBA players will see in an entire season of grinding on the hardwood. That is more than some guys make in their entire professional existence. The only tiny silver lining? Under the CBA, only half that forfeited cash hits the luxury tax cap. That gives the Sixers about $5.8 to $7 million in tax relief, potentially letting them dodge the luxury tax threshold, but at what cost to their soul. George is only suited up for around 27 games this year. And let's be honest, he hasn't looked like himself. He is averaging just over 16 points, 5 rebounds, and barely 4 assists. Those aren't superstar numbers, those are declining assets. The days of him effortlessly dropping 20 plus a night feel like ancient history, and the timing of this suspension, it is a total disaster. The Sixers are in a dogfight in the East, drowning in injuries, trying to keep their heads above water, and they just lost a cornerstone for 25 nights. The reaction on Times Inside the NBA Times was instantaneous and brutal. Legends like Shaq didn't mince words. Careless mistakes like this simply cannot happen. The debate is raging, balancing the serious nature of mental health against the absolute necessity of professional accountability. In Philadelphia, the fan base is irate. They have watched this team stumble through injuries all year, clinging to hope. This suspension isn't just a hurdle. It feels like a betrayal. It adds a layer of toxicity to an already frustrating season. This bomb has reignited the war over the NBA's drug policies and how they collide with legitimate mental health treatments. Critics are screaming about therapeutic use exemptions. Where was the paperwork? Why wasn't this cleared? The league has a process for this, but apparently George bypassed the protocol for whatever substance he ingested. This is his first offense, sure, but he is 35. The clock is ticking louder than ever, and this suspension pauses time when he has none to spare. The question haunting the franchise now, is the Sixers season dead in the water? Is George's future in Philly already written in ink? And what does this do to his legacy? Is he a Hall of Famer or a what could have been? It all comes down to the brutal reality. His age, that massive contract, the plummeting production, the injuries, and now the suspension. The Philadelphia 76ers are navigating a hurricane without a compass, their roster battered and bruised throughout the entire 2026 campaign. Paul George's 25-game ban delivers a crushing blow, a knockout punch to the jaw of this organization. It reverberates through every corridor of the arena, forcing the team to confront a nightmare scenario they never dreamed of when they signed the 9-time All-Star. You want to talk impact? Look at the numbers. With George on the floor, the Sixers hold a defensive rating of 110.1. That number represents the elite two-way dominance that made him a legend. Without him, the floor collapses. That rating spikes to a disastrous 114.9. That 4.8 differential is the difference between a championship contender and a team that gets swept in the first round. Just like that, the Philadelphia defensive wall crumbles. Georgia's elite ability to lock down multiple positions, challenge shots, and force critical turnovers has vanished from the lineup for the next 25 games. This is a catastrophic blow to the offense. The Sixers are suddenly missing a key engine that churns out 16.0 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 3.7 assists every single night. You might say those numbers don't scream superstar compared to his peak years, but don't be fooled, that is vital secondary scoring that keeps the heat off Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Now, with George no longer demanding the defense's respect, look for opposing teams to suffocate the Sixers' two remaining stars, collapsing their schemes and making every possession a grueling uphill battle for everyone on the floor. Head coach Nick Nurse is staring down a tactical nightmare, forced to rebuild his entire rotation on the fly while the season hangs in the balance. He has to lean heavily on Kelly Oubre Jr., Caleb Martin, and unproven rookies to patch the holes on the wing, a desperate move that threatens to shatter the chemistry they spent months building. The minutes George leaves behind have to go somewhere, and players who were comfortable in their roles are about to be pushed to their absolute breaking point. Nurse played it cool publicly, expressing disappointment but preaching resilience. Yet you have to wonder what is really going on behind closed doors. He talked about the need to pull our socks up a little tighter and seize the moment, but let's be real, is that enough to stop the bleeding? It feels like classic coach speak, a mask of confidence designed to hide the terrifying reality that this team is in serious trouble. Nurse claimed the suspension might not blow up their deadline plans, but he punted the real pressure to GM Daryl Morey. The Sixers are sitting at 26-21, clinging to the number 6 seed in the East. That might look safe on paper, but take a closer look at the standings and you will see they are dancing on the edge of a cliff. A single game, just one game, is all that separates them from the chasing pack of the Orlando Magic and the Miami Heat. In an Eastern Conference dogfight where playoff fates are sealed by tiebreakers, every single game George misses is a potential season killer. Sure, they have played without George before, posting a 10-10 record in his absence, but let's not pretend that inspires confidence. Playing 500 ball might keep you alive, but for a franchise with championship or bust expectations, merely surviving is a disaster. Breaking even is not going to cut it when you are fighting tooth and nail to secure home court advantage and avoid a first-round exit. You need to dominate, not just float. But here is the twist. The controversy brings a bizarre financial lifeline that the front office can exploit. This suspension hands the Sixers a massive $5.87 million luxury tax credit. That slashes their tax overage from around $7 million all the way down to a manageable $1.3 million. This is a game changer. It fundamentally rewrites the script for their flexibility heading into the February 5th, 2026 trade deadline. Before this news broke, the Sixers were backed into a corner, facing painful choices about shedding salary just to get under the tax apron. Now, the suspension flips the board, changing the entire calculus of the season. The team can suddenly breathe. They might move lower-tier contracts like Eric Gordon or Andre Drummond instead of sacrificing crucial pieces like Oubre or Quentin Grimes. This newfound flexibility unlocks trade scenarios that were completely impossible just 24 hours before the suspension hit the news cycle. And there is another layer to this drama. After George's 5th missed game, the team gains the power to move him to the suspended list, instantly freeing up a roster spot. That is a golden ticket to add depth through trades or free agency. The Sixers have a rare window to bring in reinforcements, specifically tailored to plug the gaping holes left by George's absence, potentially saving their season. But the timing is brutal. With the suspension dropping days before the deadline, Morey is forced into a high-stakes game of speed chess. Does he hold the line and pray the current roster survives the storm? Does he push all his chips in and aggressively hunt for upgrades? Or does he use the tax relief to make safe, marginal moves that bolster depth without mortgaging the future? Every option is a gamble. Standing pat is a bet on internal growth and the hope that George returns ready for a miracle playoff run. Getting aggressive could destroy their future assets for a team that suddenly looks a lot more fragile than it did last week. Conservative moves might feel safe, but will they actually move the needle when the pressure cooks in April and May? And don't forget, the locker room, the emotional toll adds a volatile element to an already explosive situation. Players bleed for each other. That brotherhood is forged in the fire of an 82-game grind and the intense pressure of playoff prep. Taking George out rips a veteran voice right out of the heart of that locker room. They are losing a guy who has been to the mountaintop, someone who knows how to steady the ship when the waves get rough. How the rest of the squad reacts to this shock to the system will define who they are and decide the fate of their season. We have seen teams fold under this kind of pressure, but others find a gear they didn't know they had. The next 25 games will reveal the true character of the Philadelphia 76 ERs. Will they rise or will they crumble? Listen, the NBA calendar is a ruthless beast that smells blood in the water and shows absolutely zero mercy for teams collapsing from the inside. The games keep coming like a freight train, and let's be real, opponents don't give a damn about your locker room drama, they smell weakness. These guys are headhunters out there looking to pad their stats, secure their playoff seeds, and cash their own checks while you bleed out. Now the Sixers have to survive a gauntlet without one of their headliners, facing Sharks who are circling the tank and looking for an easy kill. But let's look at the bigger, scarier picture here, the catastrophic impact on the franchise's future. This isn't just about a season. Paul George's suspension casts a dark, suffocating cloud over Philadelphia's long-term blueprint, injecting a level of toxic uncertainty that could wreck this roster for years. The truth is, this isn't just punishment. It's a warning that Philly's entire future is suddenly in jeopardy. Fallout here is nuclear. It extends way past the 25 games he's sitting out, threatening to slam the championship window shut right in the faces of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. You have to remember, George is locked into a massive 4-year, $212 million mega deal that handcuffs him to Philadelphia all the way through the 2027-2028 season. We are talking about a salary cap hit for 2026 to 2027 that sits at a jaw-dropping $54.1 million with a player option climbing to $56.6 million at the end. Those figures represent a colossal financial gamble on a guy who just turned 35 and is now dragging the heavy, controversial baggage of a drug suspension. And you cannot, I repeat, cannot ignore the age factor when you're trying to calculate George's worth moving forward. At 35 years old, he is walking into the twilight zone of his career, where questions about his ability to perform in his late 30s aren't just whispers, they are screaming red alerts. The athletic drop-off is coming, and it comes for everybody. Eventually, it doesn't care how talented you are, it doesn't care about your hustle, and it certainly doesn't care about your legacy. Father Time is the only undefeated champion in sports history, and he's coming for Paul George. This suspension essentially tanks his trade value, leaving Philadelphia stuck if they ever thought about pulling the ripcord on their high-priced superstar. Front offices are already terrified of handing out max money to guys in their mid-30s, but adding a drug violation? That makes George radioactive to potential trade partners? It is the perfect storm of disaster. Declining athleticism, an exorbitant salary, and now serious disciplinary baggage crashing his market value. The Sixers are now standing on the edge of a cliff regarding their team construction, especially with Embiid constantly fighting his own war against injuries. Maxey is the golden child, the future of the franchise, but you can't leave him on an island. He needs elite backup to reach that next level. Paul George was signed to be that third pillar, the guy to finally push Philly over the hump and into the promised land. Instead, he has morphed into a walking distraction and a giant question mark. You cannot build a dynasty when your foundation is cracking. The issue here goes way deeper than missing jump shots. It's about trust. It's about dependability. Can this organization honestly bet their lives on George showing up when the pressure is highest? His medical chart was already a horror movie. This suspension just turned the volume up to a deafening roar. And now we have to talk about the mental health angle of this violation, which adds a whole new layer of complexity to this mess. Obviously, the Sixers want to help the guy deal with whatever demons led him to that treatment, but they also have to protect the shield and ensure this doesn't become a recurring nightmare. Walking that tightrope between supporting your player and protecting your investment is going to be a brutal balancing act. Every future negotiation, every extension for other players, every restructuring conversation is now tainted by the shockwaves of this suspension. How does this wreck their cap sheet? What happens if George's game falls off a cliff and he becomes unplayable while cashing $50 million checks? These were nightmares that didn't exist before January 31st, 2026. Now, they are the only things that matter. And don't you dare underestimate the rage brewing in the fan base. Philadelphia fans have suffered through the process, endured years of heartbreak, injuries, and front office blunders, always watching the trophy slip through their fingers. George was billed as the savior, the final piece of the championship puzzle. Instead, he feels like another curse, another source of agony for a city that is running on empty when it comes to patience. The analysts aren't sugarcoating this. There is zero positive spin for George's future or the team's stability right now. The Sixers went all in on George, betting the house that he was the ticket to a ring. Right now, that bet looks like a disaster compared to the day the ink dried on the contract. The organization faces a brutal crossroad. Do they double down and pray he's still a cornerstone for their title dreams? Or do they admit he's a distressed asset and look to dump him the second they get an opening? It's a nightmare scenario, plain and simple. Do you double down on a 35-year-old veteran whose body is breaking down and who now carries the baggage of a suspension? Or do you try to move him? Good luck. You're looking at getting cents on the dollar compared to that massive max contract. The front office has to face the brutal reality. They have to build a war plan assuming George is a ghost, unavailable, unreliable, or just a shell of his former self. You can't just cross your fingers and pray he snaps back into all-star mode to save the season. That dream of him carrying Philly deep into June, it's fading fast. They need a plan B, a plan C, and a miracle. The roster needs to be flexible enough to survive whatever disaster strikes next. And don't think for a second this stops at the front office. The locker room is watching. What are the young guns thinking when they see this mess? Is the respect gone? Is the chemistry poisoned? You have to wonder if this creates a divide that lasts long after the suspension is served. These are the silent killers of championship teams. The tension you can't see in the stats, but you can feel on the court. Here is the terrifying truth. The clock is ticking on the Joel Embiid era. The window is slamming shut. With Embiid's medical chart looking like a horror novel, Philly doesn't have the luxury of patience. They can't just wait for George to figure it out. When your MVP is battling chronic health issues, every single game is life or death for the franchise. And this suspension, it just suffocated the timeline even more. It throws a grenade into an already volatile situation. The ripple effects are catastrophic. It infects everything. Draft picks, free agency targets, trade talks, the salary cap nightmare. Every single move the Sixers make now has to account for the instability of Paul George. The math has completely changed. This isn't just about losing a few games, folks. This suspension threatens to derail the entire future of the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, let's talk about the man himself. We are watching the legacy of Paul George hang in the balance. This suspension couldn't have come at a worse time. He is already fighting father time, his body is betraying him, and the critics are circling. It is the perfect storm of decline. Make no mistake, what goes down in these next few months will decide if history remembers him as a legend or a cautionary tale of unfulfilled potential. The red flags were waving long before the suspension news broke. The decline was staring us in the face. We are talking 16 points a game and 27 starts. That is a massive drop-off for a guy who used to sleepwalk into 20-point nights. That explosive athleticism, that first step that made him a terror on the wing, it is gone. The scouts see it. The fans see it. No lift on the jumper. Efficiency plummeting. He looks grounded. It reeks of a superstar whose prime has left the building. And now he is capped at 37 games max if he returns perfectly on March 25th, 2026. That is a dangerously small window. How do you build rhythm? How do you forge championship chemistry in that time? You can't just flip a switch and be great when the playoffs start. Even George knows he is in deep water. He has called it out himself. He labeled this the rock bottom of his career, a disastrous debut season in Philadelphia that has gone off the rails. Injuries, bricks, and now a suspension. It is an avalanche of adversity that would break a lesser player. For a 35-year-old trying to prove he is still a superstar, this mountain might be too high to climb. He claims the violation came from improper medication during mental health treatment. That adds a whole new layer of personal struggle that could shatter his focus when he steps back on the court. You combine that mental weight with the rehab from knee surgeries and the endless load management protocols, you have a web of obstacles threatening to destroy whatever confidence he has left. The whispers are getting louder. People are actually asking if Paul George needs to come off the bench to survive until the postseason. Think about that. One of the greatest wings of this generation, reduced to a sixth man role. 2 years ago, you would have been laughed out of the room for suggesting it. Now, it is a legitimate conversation the Sixers have to have if they want to salvage this wreck. Looking down the road, this suspension torpedoes his trade value and turns the roster puzzle into a nightmare. Who wants to touch an aging max contract with this much baggage? Teams were already hesitant. Now they are running in the other direction. Discipline issues, injury history, declining stats. That is a trifecta of red flags that scares every GM in the league. He is not just a risk anymore. He is a liability, a high-risk asset that might not pay off. The slide from superstar to role player is happening right before our eyes, and it is accelerating with every setback. And if this spiral continues, we might be talking about early retirement way sooner than anyone expected when he was dominating the league just a few seasons back. Everything hangs on what happens next. His return isn't just a game, it is a fight for survival. Everything is on the line right now. One explosive run could flip the script, reminding the world why this man is a 9-time All-Star and silencing the mob screaming that he is finished. But if he stumbles, if he looks slow or disjointed out there, that tag washed up becomes permanent, destroying his leverage and nuking any hope of one last massive payday in free agency. The suspension isn't just a hurdle, it is a dark stain bleeding onto a legacy that was supposed to be pristine. We are talking about a guy who defied gravity, a warrior who snapped his leg in 2014 and clawed his way back to the summit of the basketball world. But now, the headline reads drug suspension for the very first time, and that gives his haters all the gasoline they need to burn his reputation to the ground. The wolves are out, analysts and social media trolls are tearing him apart, claiming he is weak-minded, a mercenary chasing checks without ever sniffing a championship ring. That cruel playoff P nickname, it is getting louder, uglier, and now it feels like they have got legitimate ammo. Does it matter if it is fair? No, because this controversy is now tattooed onto his history forever. Remember the Indiana days? He was a young king, battling the Giants in the East, looking like the future face of the entire league. Then came the Thunder in Oklahoma City. He and Westbrook were a highlight reel waiting to happen, but when the lights got bright in the postseason, the show got canceled. L. A was supposed to be the coronation Kawhi. George, a dynasty on paper that crumbled into nothing but injuries and empty promises. Now he is in Philly, and it feels like we are watching a tragic rerun, sky-high hype, crashing down into a reality where the trophy remains totally out of reach. Bad luck? Bad rosters? Or is it him? The fact remains, 0 rings. For a talent this generational, that empty finger is a screaming hole in his biography. But there is a twist. His raw honesty about the mental battle could turn him from a villain into a human being we actually root for. If he rises from the ashes one more time, this scandal becomes just another dragon he slayed on the way to glory. The final buzzer hasn't sounded yet. This entire mess, born from a struggle for mental peace, might actually revolutionize how we view athlete wellness. Making his voice louder off the hardwood than his game is on it, he could become the champion for every player fighting demons in the dark. But let's be real, he has to survive this storm first, or this suspension becomes the tombstone on his career. The next 12 to 18 months are do or die. Will we see the resurrection of a legend, or are we watching the rapid, painful collapse of Paul George live on national TV? Forget the stats and the money for a second. The human cost here is astronomical. This is personal hell. He is navigating a minefield during what might be the darkest chapter of his life. When your private nightmares collide with your public career, it creates a pressure cooker that goes way beyond basketball. 25 games. That is a massive chunk of the calendar gone. But in a twisted way, it forces a timeout, a chance to heal a body and mind that have been breaking down for years. He is 35. Father Time is undefeated. This break is his last chance to reboot the system. He said it himself. He needs to get his mind right and his body bulletproof. The price tag? $1.7 million gone in a flash. That stings. Sure, he is wealthy, but losing that kind of cash overnight adds a layer of stress you can't just ignore. He has banked hundreds of millions, so he won't starve, but the principle of the loss hits harder than the checkbook. And the spotlight, it is blinding. The media is circling like sharks because this is tied to his mental state. That level of exposure turns a difficult moment into a psychological war zone. Every move, every shadow, every rumor is being dissected under a microscope. His pills, his therapy, his crumbling jump shot, it is all out there for the world to judge. But he didn't run. He stood tall, looked the camera in the eye, and apologized to the city and the fans. That takes guts. No sub-stories. No finger-pointing. He owned the mess and took the heat. Here is the conflict. The man suspended for a rule violation is the same man fighting to normalize mental health conversations. This controversy exposes the brutal reality of seeking help while living in a fishbowl where perfection is the only option. Benched for trying to fix his head? The irony is tragic, and everybody sees it. But when the stadium lights cut out, where does a superstar go? Straight back to the foundation, his wife Daniela, Rajic, and their children. In the eye of this hurricane, this enforced exile might be the only quiet moment they ever get. Because, let's be real, the NBA grind is a monster that eats you alive with brutal practices, back-to-back games, and cameras shoved in your face 24/7. Suddenly, the noise stops. It is a terrifying silence, but also a rare lifeline, a chance to anchor himself with the people who matter before the storm hits again. And here is the twist. George isn't totally locked out. He is still haunting the facility, a ghost in the machine, allowed in the building even if he is banned from the hardwood. It is a strange purgatory. He can lift, he can sweat, he can rehab his body, but he has to watch from the shadows, while his brothers go to war without him. It keeps him tethered to the dream, stopping him from spiraling into total isolation. But look at the bigger picture. This disaster, it might just arm him with a new weapon. George could emerge as a crusader for mental health, turning this public humiliation into a powerful platform, maybe leading to real change in how the league handles the invisible battles players fight every day. We have seen it before. Sometimes you have to hit absolute rock bottom to build a solid foundation. One thing is certain. This wake-up call changes the game on medical decisions. No more cutting corners. It is about securing every therapeutic use exemption by the book. The league has the rules in place. They have these golden tickets that let players take banned substances if and only if they have a legitimate medical reason to save their health. But George, he missed that step. He took the meds without the permission slip, and that one oversight triggered this avalanche. Now he has to walk through the fire of public opinion. The internet is undefeated, and the speculation about what exactly was in his system creates a pressure cooker that tests your soul, not just your jump shot. Social media has turned this into a spectacle overnight, amplifying the hate and the love until it is deafening. Imagine trying to fix your mind while millions of strangers scream at you through a screen. But pull back the lens. This is not just about Paul George. This is part of a dark, recurring timeline in NBA history. The league has been warring with substance issues for decades, shifting from the Iron Fist lifetime bans of the 1980s to a system that tries, at least in theory, to save the player rather than just destroy the career. We do not have to look far for comparisons. The shadows of recent scandals are looming large. Flashback to January 2024, Tristan Thompson gets slapped with a 25-game ban for ibutamoren and SARM LGD 433. Performance enhancers. No gray area there. Then, February 2025, Milwaukee's Bobby Portis Jr. Boom. 25 games for Tramadol. His camp claimed it was a mix-up, confusing it with Toradol. $1 million mistake? Or something else? dig deeper into the archives and you find the cautionary tales. OJ Mayo kicked out of the league in 2016. A second strike, a substance of abuse, and suddenly a career vanished into thin air. Tyreke Evans banished in 2019, reinstated 3 years later, but the game had moved on. He never reclaimed his throne. Or the Birdman, Chris Anderson, exiled in 2006, only to rise from the ashes in 2008. Redemption is possible, but the odds are brutal. Remember 2019? It was a bloodbath. DeAndre Ayton, John Collins, Wilson Chandler all hit with 25-game suspensions for PEDs. Every single one of them cried contaminated supplements. Every single one of them served the time. The league does not play when the test turns red. But George? His narrative has a different flavor. He is not claiming he was trying to jump higher. He says he was trying to heal his mind. That is a heavy, controversial distinction. It forces us to ask, should intent matter? The suspension is the same, but does the reason change how we see the man? This is undeniably a low point, a superstar admitting he messed up while trying to get help during a vulnerable moment. It is raw, and it is messy. But he didn't run. He owned it. No excuses. That kind of accountability is rare in pro sports, and it might be the thing that saves his legacy. Diehard fans know this man is made of steel. Remember the horror of 2014? The leg injury that shocked the world? He didn't just walk again. He became an all-star again. He defies the odds for a living. That history of resilience screams one thing. This suspension won't break him. It will just be another scar on a warrior who refuses to stay down. The final chapter of Paul George has not been written yet. But look at the facts. He is 35. The contract is massive. The stats are dipping. The body is hurting. And now, the drug ban. Is the wall closing in? Do not count him out. Legends have come back from deeper holes. The greatest stories are built on the ashes of defeat. Is this the tragic end of a Hall of Fame run? Or the dramatic prologue to the greatest comeback we have ever seen? The suspense is suffocating. The truth will be revealed on the hardwood in the months to come. Every game will be a verdict. Until then, the world holds its breath and watches. Thanks for riding with us. If you want more high-stakes drama and untold stories, smash that box on your screen right now. Do not miss it.